Well, I finished eating. The girls each had a taco apiece. I'm still in the same parking lot at McWormel's. It's one in the middle of town, very busy, and it attracts a lot of people who would make me feel like I wouldn't want to stay here at night. So I will eventually leave. I have one more dollar left, so I can go to a different McDonald's, probably one down by the Walmart where we used to live, and go all the time to that McWormel's, and then I'll probably go in there, charge everything I've got, walk the dogs, not in that order, and then tonight just stay there and sleep in the parking lot. It's pretty open, surrounded by fields, and I like that area. So anyway, I wanted you guys to hang with me while I study some Buddhist literature. A really great book on the history of well, Chinese Buddhism, and how that then was, how Buddhism moved originally from Shakyamuni to his disciples. It was an oral tradition, and then moved to the written tradition, and how that worked, and then how it moved from India to China. I'm still reading the aspects of how it moved from India to China here. That's what's covered in this book. I read parts of the first two books in this series, and I couldn't find one of them, the one I was in the middle of reading, so I grabbed this one, and I'm gonna read as much of it as possible. It's intriguing to me. I am not a person who's ever been interested in history or travel or geography, but Buddhism makes me interested in all of those things, and so I'm interested in particularly this history of Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana as opposed to Hinayana, also known as Theravada Buddhism. Theravada, or also known as Hinayana. Theravada Buddhism, which isn't really covered by these books, is a much more formalistic, ceremony-driven type of Buddhism. And Mahayana Buddhism is the kind of Buddhism where the Bodhisattva is an essential part, because the whole point is to share Buddhism with others in order to save all living beings. In other words, it emphasizes compassion. So these books are on the history of Mahayana Buddhism, and I'm, of course, that's what we practice. It's the Buddhism that a bodhisattva of the earth is someone who comes to the Saha world of suffering in order to save all living beings. And we're the only ones who are bodhisattvas of the earth, which is really interesting to me, at least that I've ever heard of. And the bodhisattvas of the earth are talked about in the Lotus Sutra. That's where they appear. So any teaching that doesn't follow the Lotus Sutra is going to exclude the bodhisattva of the earth, because that's where the bodhisattva of the earth makes their entrance. And Shakyamuni's asking the assembly, who will spread my teaching after my passing? And these really beautiful, refined Buddhas, and beings come from distant lands and surround him and say, we will spread your teaching. And he says, who will spread my teaching? And I hope I'm getting this right, but who will spread my teaching? And all of a sudden a great fissure, there's an earthquake, and a great fissure in the earth opens up, and out come dancing bodhisattvas of the earth. And they're really rough, and they've been through it. And they say, we will make a vow to spread your teaching and save all living beings. And Shakyamuni Buddha entrusts the 4 leaders of the bodhisattvas of the earth with that vow. And he declines from giving it to the more refined ones. He gives it to the ones, I like to think of them more like Hell's Angels. They're missing their teeth, they've got scars, they've got tattoos, they're wearing leathers, they're riding their bikes. That isn't real literal from the Lotus Sutra, I hope you know, but they've been through it. They're the real thing. They've been willing to suffer. And they say, we will spread your teaching. And he agrees. And so that's why I'm a bodhisattva of the earth. I made that vow, that original vow from time without beginning. And when the Lotus Sutra was originally preached. And of course it was preached by Shakyamuni in this world, in India, about 2,500 years ago, and he preached it for the last 8 years of his life. But and he said, this is my highest teaching. Over and over and over it says that in the Lotus Sutra. And so, but before that, you know, the Lotus Sutra was taught since time without beginning. We've been Buddhists since time without beginning. That's very, very hard for me to fathom because it's so abstract, but we're supposed to understand it in a very real and practical way, and I have a hard time doing that. The reason that's emphasized is because that's our true identity. Our true identity is that we're Buddhas. And when we act contrary to our Buddha nature, it's because we have forgotten who we really are. We've been deluded from understanding that we're infinitely powerful, compassionate, and and everything good. That's who we really are. And when we act contrary to that, like say going out and and drinking when we're alcoholics, or if we're sex addicts and go out and have sex with partners who disgrace us or degrade us, or if we abuse one another, or if we're violent to one another, or I would even argue that even the collection and stockpiling of weapons like guns is contrary to our Buddha nature. It's denying the Buddha nature in ourselves and others. Because what we really are so powerful, we don't need weapons. We don't need weapons, we need Nam-myoho-renge-kyo. And that will change anything and everything. So anyway, we have to remember that we're Buddhas. And the way we remember or manifest our Buddha nature, or our highest potential is to chant Nam-myoho-renge-kyo. When we chant Nam-myoho-renge-kyo, our inherent enlightenment comes forward. And we make good decisions. We don't go out and hurt people. We don't go out and hurt ourselves. And so we have to chant Nam-myoho-renge-kyo to bring forth this Buddha nature. It's not just going to automatically come out on its own. It's not going to come out if we're practicing a different teaching, because those other teachings don't even say that it's going to happen. That's going to happen if we practice that. They promise other things, like when we die, we'll go to an afterlife of either bliss or hell. Or they promise that if we practice this practice for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime for like forever, we'll someday attain enlightenment. Or when we die, we'll go to the Pure Land, much like heaven. And those promises don't help us in this life right now. We need to transform our lives in this life right now. And we do that by chanting Nam-myoho-renge-kyo, bringing forth our Buddha nature, transforming ourselves, and transforming everything around us in the process. And some people really slander the Soka Gakkai International, the organization which is more important to me than my own life, because it's the only organization that's spreading Kosen Rufu. It's the only one working for the peace and happiness of all living beings. So if an organization is working for peace and happiness of all living beings, and they are doing so in a prison system world run by psychopaths, sociopaths, and evil people, or the Devil King Mara, who's also known as freely enjoying things conjured by others, then within that prison system world, if there's someone trying to free us, you can only imagine that they're going to be slandered, persecuted, obstructed, and harassed to the point that they'll quit. They'll quit. They'll compromise their beliefs. I was sitting in the hot tub yesterday with one of my classmates from my swim class. She's a much older woman. Her name is Yvonne, and I don't know how we got on the subject, but we were talking about the health hazards all over the fitness center and the locker rooms. And I told her I'm very, very conscious of health hazards, and I make complaints about it. And she said she does too. And I said, I feel that it's my obligation to make complaints at the school when there's something wrong, particularly with injustices. And I told her about Nam-myoho-renge-kyo in Buddhism. And she said she very passionately agreed that we have an obligation to speak out against injustices. And she said that she writes letters regularly, both speaking out, with complaints, and also, when some things are going well. She says she feels it's her obligation to do that. And I said, me too. So we got to talking, and I started explaining to her about my personality type. And and I told her that INFJs, and she'd heard of the personality types, and her daughter, she said, is really into her own personality type, as well as her mother's, this woman, Yvonne, I was talking to. And she said, but I don't remember the details. And I said, well, you seem to me to be of the same personality type that I am. And I told her that INFJs are introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. And she's like, yes, 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 yes. And and I said, we are the rarest personality types. We feel the most misunderstood because we are the most misunderstood. And excuse me. And that I named all the people all the great people who share this personality with me and us. I said Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., and someone else. I think I named about 5 of them, and she says, those are all the people I admire most. And I said, me too. And I think that that's why we admire them, because they're our personality type. I said, we feel that we have to speak out against injustices at almost any expense. We're willing to give up almost anything. And that was an understatement, because we're willing to give up anything not to compromise our principles. So, and she was like, yes. And I said that, well, and that we have to speak out against injustices, and we're very uncompromising about our ethics and principles. And she was like, yes, 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 yes. I said, well, it sounds to me like we have the same personality type. And I said, you know, people on Facebook have been saying that, you know, deriding people who post pictures of Robin Williams after his death, and people who speak out against injustices on Facebook, as if what we're doing is like a self-righteous waste of time. And I said, but I went ahead and changed my profile picture to a picture of Robin Williams. And she said, good for you. And I said, and I also said that I use Facebook as a means to stand up for justice and speak out against injustices, and that I'll use any means at my disposal to do that. And she says, absolutely. And then I said, I didn't know that I would find a kindred spirit today. And I really needed it. This was yesterday. And I turned, and there was a man, and he was sitting there, and we were talking. She said, you know, Robin Williams his death was a great loss to everyone. And I said, yes. And I turned around, and there was a man in the hot tub, and he said, he had come in when we were talking, and he said, oh, I agree that, you know, Robin Williams, his death was just a terrible loss. He said, I was in love with him. And I smiled, and I said, I was too. I said, how could we not be? I meant to study, but these things are on my mind. says that the Chinese monk Faxian, circa 340 to 420, who traveled west across the desert in 399 CE, wrote that, quote, "The sands are full of evil spirits and burning winds, and anyone who encounters them dies. No one is left unharmed. No birds fly overhead. No animals run across the ground. Squint one's eyes, gaze as one may in the four directions. He can find no place to turn to, nothing to guide him. Only the dried bones of the dead serve as markers of the trail." And this was the passage that the people who spread Buddhism from India to China came over. Sprinkling. I guess this was also the Silk Road. It eventually became the Silk Road.